Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're doing something a bit special. We're going to walk right alongside someone, we'll call them the author or simply the seeker, on this really deeply personal yet highly organized journey to find Islam's most authentic expression. The author of our source material has pulled together their own research from books, scholars, and just everyday individuals, meticulously organizing it to help us navigate this topic cleanly. So let's dive right into this incredibly thoughtful exploration together in a relaxed and open-minded way. So the seeker starts right at square one. The obvious first question they ask at the very beginning of this journey is simply, what is Islam? And, the common answer is pretty straightforward. It's widely designed as a monotheistic religion revealed to the Prophet Muhammad back in the 7th century. It centers completely on the belief in one God, Allah, and submission to his will. It's built on these core practices known as the 5 pillars, declaration of faith, prayer, fasting, charity, and pilgrimage. Its scripture is the Qur'an, and its guiding tradition is known as the Sunnah. Now, just so we're all completely on the same page, let's clarify that last term really quick. What exactly is the Sunnah? Well, the author provides a very clear definition here. The Sunnah is the lived example and guiding tradition of the Prophet Muhammad. It's essentially how he put the religion into practice. Understanding this term is absolutely essential for following the seeker's foundational framework as we move forward. But see, once the seeker gets that basic definition down, they immediately hit this much more profound layer. The deeper question isn't just what is it, but rather, with so many variations out there in the world today, which expression actually truly represents Islam? And wow, this brings us to a massive, intricate tapestry of traditions. The seeker looks around and sees that within Sunni Islam alone, there's just this huge array of diverse schools of thought, like Hanafi, Shafi'i, Maliki, and Hanbali, each with different emphases on law and practice. Then there are theological schools like Ash'ari and Maturidi. You've got broad movements ranging all the way from the mysticism of Sufism to the literalism of Salafism. And of course, Shia Islam adds entirely distinct traditions, leadership structures, and interpretations. The tricky part for the seeker? Every single one of these groups claims absolute authenticity, usually tracing their legitimacy right back to the Prophet and his companions. So the crucial point here, the real friction, is this contrast. Is Islam defined solely by its universal foundational texts and practices, or is it defined by the lived traditions and specific interpretations of its human communities? Is it just the unity of belief in one God, or is it the specific theology of one sect that makes it somehow more Islamic than another? This right here is the core dilemma our seeker is grappling with. So where does the seeker even go from here? Well, the author outlines a really logical next step. Instead of getting completely lost in the weeds of all those sectarian differences, the seeker decides to focus entirely on the shared foundation of Islam first. By establishing a really strong anchor, they're hoping to avoid being overwhelmed by the sheer diversity of the faith right at the start. And what's actually kind of fascinating is just how simple that shared foundation really is. The uniting beliefs across almost all sects include the belief in one God, belief in the prophets, belief in the Day of Judgment, and the daily practice of worship through those 5 pillars. That's it. These are the core elements that unite Muslims across all the various sects. This becomes the seeker's anchor. To hold on to that anchor, the seeker makes a very specific, deliberate choice for their starting point: the Qur'an alone. Now, the author clarifies, and this is important, this doesn't mean they've suddenly joined one of those specific Qur'an-only groups out there. Not at all. They're just using the text as their personal, neutral baseline. They actually note that they've been quite discouraged by the pressure from various leaders and groups who are just super eager for them to join their specific sects. And that naturally brings us to another really important term we need to quickly define: Hadeeth. Hadeeth are basically collections of traditions containing the reported sayings and actions of the Prophet Muhammad. As the seeker is navigating this journey, they pinpoint these collections as a significant point of tension, and honestly, a potential stumbling block for many. But why a stumbling block, right? Well, the seeker starts to observe a stark contrast. On one side, you have the Qur'an's message. On the other side, the Hadeeth collections. The author points out that sometimes the Hadeeth actually seem to contradict the Qur'an, or they present a version of Islam that just feels a lot harsher than what the Qur'an itself presents. For someone trying to find the authentic core of the faith, this is a major, major hurdle to deal with. So the seeker decides to do something incredibly logical. Rather than just repeating the answers that various groups and scholars give, they ask the text itself. Like, what does the Qur'an itself advise about ideas and beliefs that come from outside the Qur'an? Imagine treating the Quran like an outside counselor being asked for its very own advice on this issue. And the text's own answer to that is fascinating. The author points to verses where the Quran actually describes itself as a complete guidance, a clear explanation, and a criterion. It literally calls itself a clarification of all things and guidance and mercy for those who believe. It explicitly warns against following conjecture or human traditions that have no authority from God, criticizing those who invent practices that God didn't actually command. Now, of course, the author acknowledges a necessary balance here. The Quran also clearly establishes the prophet's role, which was to explain and to actually live the revelation. His example is part of how the text was understood historically. But, and this is a really vital point for our seeker, the text itself repeatedly emphasizes that the Quran remains the ultimate standard and the decisive word that cannot be altered. No outside belief or practice should ever contradict it. So, if we approach the Quran as an outsider seeking its advice, this summary is crystal clear. Hold firmly to the revelation itself, be super careful about human additions or traditions that contradict it, and measure literally all outside claims against the Quran. It is a very clear standard for authenticity. At this point, the author just invites us to take a moment to sit and contemplate. I mean, it's a lot to take in, right? The principle is set, but human communities have developed countless ways of applying it over centuries. We should really mirror the seeker's own thoughtful pause here and respect the heavy weight of this journey. Looking ahead, the seeker has laid out a roadmap for us. Step 1, which is what we covered today, is the introduction and core foundation. Step 2 explores the basics of Hadith, and Step 3 will cover the prophet's role. The author does note that they have limited time and funding for this project, just asking for a little patience as they build this out. And we're going to leave you today with this final, really provocative thought that the seeker themselves is left wrestling with. How do we actually discern which interpretations are faithful explanations of the Quran and which are simply human traditions that go beyond it? That is the ultimate struggle we'll continue to explore. Thank you so much for joining us on this journey today. And as the seeker says to close their own writing, Assalamu alaikum.